And it is our great honor today to have our Minister Emeritus, the Reverend Dr. David Sammons.
You've had a lot of words and music coming your way. Why don't you just stand if you want and take a breath? Okay, enough breathing. It's an honor to stand here in the sanctuary that I had a hand in building, and under these banners that my wife and Michelle Mazar designed and sewed. Not too long ago, I had a call from a former student of mine who was then serving as the minister of the UU Fellowship in Ames, Iowa. Ames was among the first fellowships ever founded in 1946, when the idea was the UU would plant congregations in college town, hoping that the professors and graduate students might show up. And they did in Ames, enough so that over the years they finally built a building. But they had absolutely no idea what to do with it. So there was a program called Minister on Loan, in which churches that had ministers that were somewhat successful loaned their minister to another congregation to help in their evolution. And I was asked to go to Ames, Iowa. Usually the idea was for the minister to pave the way for a new permanent minister to come, but that wasn't my job. I developed kind of a reputation as a person who built churches through programming and outreach into the community, and that was my task in Ames. And I think that was also my task when I was called to be the minister here. You've heard a lot about the early days, and actually there was a lot of up and down because it was complicated. And when this site was finally purchased, at the same time Aaron Gilmartin was called as minister, there was a big dream, a dream of a full-scale church and a campus that stretched all the way up that hill behind us with a sanctuary sticking out like a flying saucer. Well, the city would never have actually allowed that under zoning, as we found when it came time to think about a new building for the congregation. We had only those two buildings across from that old patio over there, and into one of them was stuffed everything but the church school. It had the church office, the minister's office, it had a sanctuary which is also used for all the other activities of the church, and the bathrooms. It was a squeeze. And we decided that we could not grow if we just stayed in that facility. So a long-range planning committee was formed with Art Unger as its chair and a lot of good people on it that developed a long-range plan. The goal was to become a 500-member congregation with the staff, program, and facilities to go along with it. And more or less, we've achieved that. That was a big shift, though, as you heard about meeting in these small little places and even this confined space here on this hill. But the leaders of this church decided that that vision, actually a vision that had been there from the beginning in the minds of a lot of people, that vision needed to come true. It took a big shift because a lot of the people in the congregation at that time valued the community they felt went with a smaller group of people who knew each other. But I had come from much churches to be the minister here, and my experience showed that you can have exactly that kind of community in a larger church. In fact, more opportunities for it because you could do a lot more programming. But we had to do things. We had to get an RE director because the RE director, when I came, quit. She was a student at Star King and she had other things she wanted to do. There was no choir. There was a kind of a grungy piano that served for music, but mostly we used recorded music in those days. So we had to make changes. We had to hire staff. We had to change buildings. We built a little office building over there, so we had a little more space in the original buildings, and we got on with it. It took over 20 years of planning by that committee to get from the first commitment to expand these facilities to actually have this sanctuary. It took a lot of time, and it took a lot of convincing of people that we had the energy, the enthusiasm, and the money in our pockets to go with selling land. All that land above the upper parking lot was church property, and we sold it for a development. Oh, it took an ingenious plan with the city to get a zoning permit to do it because they didn't like buildings built on slopes. So we had to include the lower parking lot as one of the parcels in that development. Clever, and it worked. So over 20 years to get to that goal. When I began, there was also another issue. There were many in this congregation who were so proud of being lay-led, they feared that a minister would come in and be too controlling and take over power from them. But that wasn't my vision of ministry. My vision of ministry was to be empowering, to build the kind of structures, committee structures, and so forth, so that ever more people had a chance to take part in decision-making and doing the work of the church. I saw myself as a kind of peer among peers in doing this, handling the things that only a minister could do, like being a visionary and an empowerer, but leaving the task, for the most part, up to the members of this church. So we got away with a lot of things, including raising the money to go with a bequest that we had and the money from selling that property and beginning with the building of this sanctuary and then the social hall. When I came here, all this was, on this side of the property, was a field of weeds. And now look at it. The church also wanted its minister to become more involved in the community, as had its original minister, Aaron Gilmartin. In fact, Aaron, when I was a younger minister, had been one of my models. I wanted to do that, and that took finding out what in this particular community a minister might do to share his skills and enthusiasm with agencies and groups out there beyond the walls of this church. In my case, because of past experience, that included working with Planned Parenthood, which I had done for many years. It included AIDS work. It included a way of finding this church an avenue into becoming a member of the Council of Churches, which later became, after we became a part of it, and invited others like the Reformed Jewish congregation in this community to be a part, and it became the Council of Churches. Originally, when this church had applied to be a member, we were told no, we couldn't, because we didn't believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. We said, I believe in Jesus Christ as a very good model for human behavior and for social involvement, but he's not my Lord and Savior. I am responsible for my own salvation. And finally, the Council of Church took that tack and became an interfaith council and did amazing work early in this community, say after the Rodney King incident in Los Angeles, doing anti-racist work and working to try to eliminate poverty and create low-income housing. That was something that churches could do together, no matter what their faith confessions were. In Planned Parenthood, well, I became the only minister ever to serve as president of its board, and I'm enormously proud of that. I took on lots of denominational and seminary work too, because I believed from the beginning that a minister who took his ordination as a Unitarian Universalist owed that to his denomination, just like Leslie believes that. In my early days at MDUUC, I had a lot to prove to gain the trust of this congregation. And with the help of some marvelous church leaders, I think I was able to do that. But the strength of this congregation has always been, as you heard in all those people speaking, in the enthusiasm and spirit of its members and their willingness to do what they needed to do to create a strong, loyal, thriving congregation, the congregation that exists today. And that's why when I pass on, I hope my ashes will be placed in the garden over there with those of Aaron Gilmartin, our first minister, in whose spirit I hope I followed in those years in which I was privileged to be the minister of this church. Thank you.